Welcome to the Q&A series with Jill Eng, Mindful Reality. These are specific questions asked by real people, answered through the lens of this practice. I also offer coaching sessions in this work, as well as the opportunity to purchase personalized recorded responses to your own questions through private recordings. Please refer to the website for more information on both these services. Here's a question from Max. I need constant stimulation, and I have a lot of addictive activities that I engage in. You might call these soft addictions, like over-interneting or overeating or being on my smartphone too much. I'm not sure what to do about this or if there is anything I can do. Is there any way to beat an addiction, or is there really no choice in the matter? Okay, so let's go from the beginning here. I need constant stimulation and have a lot of addictive activities that I engage in. So let's take the phrase addictive activities. Addictive is a word. It's kind of a judging word. It's a word that is very familiar in our society. So let's go with the second part of the phrase, addictive activities. So yes, we are always in a state of activity. Always. Our body is physical and it's in the space and it's on some surface, piece of furniture, floor, and just inherent in being alive, we are automatically in some activity. And we can only know what that is after we look at it. The only way we know what we're doing is because we see ourselves in the space doing something. There is, of course, a feeling or a sense that kind of goes along with that, sometimes, not even all the time, of some kind of acknowledgement or awareness of what we're doing. Now, the truth is, most of the time, we're not even having that thought train alongside our activities. It's only really if you are asked how you spend your time, or the mind is a strange kind of thing. It really is just neurological processes. We call this sort of inner world or introspective sense, we call it, the mind. And there's a feeling in memory, really, of how we spent our time. I mean, this is too complicated, really, to even describe. And of course, I'm talking about what people refer to as consciousness. But what I'm going to say is if you really, really, really pay attention, you'll kind of notice that when you are involved in your activities, there isn't necessarily even, a mental story going along at the same time. It comes and goes, flickers in and out. So when Max says that he is engaged in addictive activities, that is kind of a judgment after the fact, of course. And it's like a summary awareness of, well, what did I do today? Well, I spent so much time on the internet, or I spent a lot of time overeating. And of course, what I'm leaving out here is the sort of constant inner state of judgment that trails alongside our activities when we are involved with them. But as I said, that inner commentary kind of comes and goes, and it's a backdrop. So as I've said in other recordings in this series, what I am going to highlight again is that a human being is a functioning organism with many, 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 many systems at play, coordinating all day long, all the time with each other. Functioning is a good word. So there's Max, occupying space somewhere, in a room, in a house, outdoors, in a car, wherever he happens to be. And his bodily movements are composed of really bone movements, right? We are a skeletal structure, a whole skeletal structure, a head included with all of our other limbs. And we move generally in relation to other objects. Even if we're walking, we are moving in relation to the ground. So we are a skeleton on a surface, is how I like to put it. Doesn't matter what we're doing. The basic thing there is that we are a skeleton on a surface. And in this case, Max's body is, let's just say, sitting in front of a computer with fingers on the keyboard, typing in certain letters that bring up certain sites on the internet, in this case, if the question at hand is, I'm addicted to over-interneting. Let's remove the word over for a minute, because the word over is a judgment. And we are just going to look at human behavior from a kind of clinical standpoint. In the same way we would observe some kind of behavior inside the body if we were a physician and had the tools to take an X-ray or do some kind of MRI, or were a pathologist looking at the cells inside the body. We're really just talking about the body moving, and the body is made of cells and molecules and atoms. In this case, we're looking at what I call the macro level. We're looking at the skeleton. So we are always just a skeleton on a surface. And in this case, Max is sitting in front of the computer with fingers on the keyboard, or fingers off the keyboard and listening to something, watching something. So there's the organism in its movement and its, positioning, as I like to say. There's the placement, the physical placement on a surface, and then there is the positioning, and then there is, the sort of movement, if there is any extra movement. Okay, so at the same time, there are thoughts that trail in and out of what we call a mind, and Max is aware of these here and there, right? Sometimes there's no awareness of that, and other times there's the awareness of the awareness. There's the awareness, I'm having a thought. And the thing that I really need to emphasize about the movement itself, and I really can't overemphasize this, because in my work, I came to this awareness or this discovery or observation, just by watching human action, watching myself in the space. But obviously there is science that backs it up, in the free will debate as to why there is no free will. That nothing that you're feeling consciously is the cause of the bodily movement, whether that is from Benjamin Libet's original experiments or fMRIs that have been done abundantly after that, showing that the initiation of action begins in the brain, that is going to makes it however the neurological processes work, that allows a signal that moves a hand to press a button on the keyboard, or to get up and go into another room and not be on the computer. Whatever the movement is, it is decided, if you may, in the brain that makes the bodily movement happen. So in terms of conscious awareness of what we're doing, we only know what that is because we saw ourselves in the behavior. So Max is sitting on his computer, let's just say for a couple of hours, observing that he's just there, sitting, watching, doing the internet, and judging himself because he wishes that he were getting up and not staying on the internet for so long. So whether you understand this via a scientific perspective or you understand it just from what I'm saying, which is still a scientific perspective because it's an observation of a body in space. But either way, you see the body there, which is after the fact. So even though we say, we refer to a word such as the now, even what we're calling the now, by the time you look at something and it registers in the mind, it's over. In other words, it's over because the only way to even look at it is that it already had to be happening. For example, if you look out the window and you see a bird flying, the bird has to be flying for you to even be looking at it. And I know we're talking about like very fine minutia here of minutes, or seconds, but really just think of milliseconds. Like time just moves too quickly in a way. It's already after the fact. The occurrence of the event is already behind you by the time you're looking at it. So when we look at our own behavior, whatever it is, it's of the past. And, by the time something comes into your sensory awareness and then you're visually, receiving information and then you're consciously having a thought, like it's over. So however you want to think of this, it means that there is no possible way to get behind our behavior in a conscious manner the way it feels. So let's just sit with that for a moment. So no matter what Max is concerned about, whether it's over-interneting, overeating, or overuse of his smartphone, it's just a stream of skeletal bones moving all day long in relation to other objects. Really simple, because the body is just this skeleton on the surface. It's always the same, right? Head, spine, rib cage, arms, hip bones, leg bones, feet, hands. It's a simple structure that's in a state of movement, as if you were just watching a bird all day long. First it does this, and then it does that, and then it does this, and then it does that. And there's a nervous system behind that bird's movements, in the exact same way that there's a nervous system behind our bodily movements. The only difference is that we have this mental commentary going on all day long that also gives us a sense that there is a conscious self inside of the brain or mind, if you will, that is choosing and controlling the bodily movements that we have. But that is not true. But this is intuitive, and we are wired this way by evolution to feel this. So you have to accept the fact that, yes, it feels like you are consciously choosing your behavior, but we are not. Okay, so let's start with that. The second question in his question was, I'm not sure what to do about this, or if there is anything I can do. And Max is a little familiar with my work, so that's why he says, or if there is anything I can do. So let's define some words here. I'm not sure what I can do about this. Okay, so in my work, I try to differentiate the words doing and action, just for the purpose of explanation. So in my practice, then, I say to myself, there is no such thing as the concept of doing. And that is because the body is automatically in a state of action, or in a state of activity, physical activity, skeletal activity, automatically. Now, I interchange the word automatically with involuntary. I really don't differentiate between the two words, even though we think of, something that's involuntary would be like your heart beating. But my hands moving is not involuntary because it's voluntary. Well, what does voluntary mean? Well, it usually means that it's kind of accompanied by a thought pattern of personal desire, personal interest, conscious will. And if you're interested in this subject matter, there is a very famous book by a former Harvard psychology professor who was also the chair of the department. Anyway, his name is Daniel Wegner, and he wrote a book called The Illusion of Conscious Will. It doesn't matter. The point is that it feels like the thoughts that we are having alongside our behavior is somehow causing the behavior. So the difference between doing and action is that the body is automatically in activity, moving, even if it's sitting still, it's breathing, blinking, swallowing, having a pulse. Sometimes a hand moves, sometimes a head moves, sometimes you turn over in bed. Whatever it is, the bodily movement is just occurring on its own. And you can see this for yourself because you can look at your body moving and think to yourself, are the thoughts that I'm having on my mind right now causing this bodily movement? I mean, you can really see it. You just have to slow down and look. Often what will happen is you will find yourself getting up to go into the kitchen. And almost instantaneously, as your feet start to get out of the chair, there's an awareness, I'm going into the kitchen. And it feels like, I just chose to go into the kitchen. But that's not really how it works if you look closely. But in any case, I say to myself, there is no such thing as the concept of doing. And that's because the body is always already in an action. It's busy all day long in some activity. And what that means is that there's no room for another activity. So when Max says, which is a completely normal and understandable question, he says, I'm not sure what to do about this, or if there is anything to do. So I would say there is nothing to do only because there's no such thing as the concept of doing. And that's because your body is already acting. It's in a full-time state of busyness. Even if you were lying in bed all day long in a very still kind of movement, that would still be action, activity. It would be what I like to call busyness. So really understand there's a difference between what we're thinking of doing, because it's this constant feeling, I need to do something. I need to do something about this situation. But the body is already busy. And that's the reason why we cannot impose another activity on top of the activity that's already occurring. And so let me be more specific. Action can only happen by the body, the skeletal structure, the organism that is physically in the space. That is our only tool for action. We only find out what our body's doing by observing it in the space. Now, this is a quick thing that's going on by the brain, but it tells you how you know what you're doing. And there's really no you here that I'm referring to, right? That in itself is a construct, a mental representation of the organism and the way the brain maps all this out. And I'm not a scientist, and I can, happily refer anyone always to people who will explain this better. But in any case, the body is already there in its activity. And the thing about this activity is that even though we tend to think in terms of moments and seconds and minutes, it's a stream of activity because time doesn't stop and there's no way to interrupt it or sort of quantify it or measure it. It's just, if you looked at a stopwatch and you kept the stopwatch on for your entire life, those numbers move quickly. It's just like, and of course, milliseconds are even, faster than what the stopwatch is doing. So it's a continual stream of bodily movement. It's already in process. It's already over by the time we can observe it in what we call a moment. So that's the good news in a way, because that's why I say there's nothing to do. There's nothing to figure out. There's no way you could ever interfere, because the you that we're talking about is just this, again, a sort of mental construct that the brain creates to give us a sense of power and control. And unfortunately, that power and control is a myth. It's a fiction. And I am somebody who prefers to attach to the reality of the activity and the action, because I recognize there's no way to move my body out of the way in this moment, because it's always this moment, right? Everything is current. The body is moving and living and existing in real time, as we think of time. So that's all fine, but you really need to understand that that is automatic. It's involuntary. The bones move by themselves. And what I mean by themselves is by your brain functioning, nervous system functioning, all the signaling that goes on that makes muscles move bones in the space. Those decisions are neurological processes, and they are occurring behind the scenes of any kind of feeling of a conscious I. And once you understand that, it'll make sense why there's no such thing as the concept of doing, and why that means that there is nothing to do. So that is either going to be liberating for somebody or very frustrating. For me, it's obviously liberating, because I feel and suffer from the pressure of having to do something and figure out how to do something to make certain things happen in my life that will remove me from situations that are uncomfortable and painful. But if there's no such thing as the concept of doing, that means there is nothing that Max can do meaning consciously do, voluntarily do, as I like to exchange the words conscious and voluntarily because they feel the same. But that doesn't mean that Max won't change behavior over time, right? I mean, in the exact same way that we think about other functions of our body, organism, person, and we put it into the category of health or, something inside the body that we would never have any control over. Even sleep is one of those things, because as much as we can feel like we do a whole bunch of things that would maybe make our sleep better, you still go to sleep at night and you hope for the best, right? So even that, which seems kind of conscious, is still one of those things that we understand. Well, ultimately, I'm vulnerable to whatever my body does. Whatever makes me sleep, I'm vulnerable to that. In the same way you would be vulnerable to your body healing itself in other ways or moving out of certain uncomfortable, painful physical symptoms, stomach problems, back problems, whatever it is. I mean, even if you did certain activities that you hoped would promote health in those areas or better health in those areas, you'd still be hoping for the best. And so it's fine to hope for the best. Absolutely. Hope for the best, that you will stop doing behavior that you don't like. But let's go on that subject for a minute, that you don't like. So what makes us like something? Well, there's a lot of judgment about, well, this thing is better than that thing, and this thing is worse than that thing, whether I really feel that way or it's just like society feels that way. I mean, I would say to Max, why is it bad to be interneting all the time? Why is it bad to be on your phone all the time? Why is it bad to be eating all the time? I mean, you say overeating, but again, where does that concept come from? So those are judgments, and they are words, and they are supported, of course, by an American culture. I'm assuming Max dealing with the American culture. The work here isn't to figure out a way to get out of the behavior. The work is to recognize these thoughts and feelings as judgments. What if you removed the word addiction? What if you removed the word addictive from your vocabulary? What if you just saw your body in the space and knew that this is where and how it has to be behaving? Because I can only find out about it after the fact. And I can hope for the best, because if I truly get pain from these activities, for whatever reason, because my judgments or someone else's judgments are just too ingrained and too painful, then sure, you hope for the best. What does that mean? You hope that your body will start doing other things, and not doing those things. But there is truly no conscious control over that, because consciousness is not something that has a force or a power. I don't even like the word consciousness, because it takes on something that isn't really what it is. What is it? Can you even define consciousness? Everybody defines it differently. And there are, so many different takes on it in the Eastern world, in the Western philosophical world, in the Western scientific world. So that's another subject matter that I do write about in actually a book I'm involved in right now. It's my third book, and there is a big section on consciousness. But anyone listening here, I'm always happy to refer you to people that I align with in those ways. So the final question, and I think I've answered it, is there any way to beat an addiction, or is there really no choice in the matter? Which is basically like the second part of his question. I'm not sure what to do about this, or if there is anything I can do. So I would just say that find a way for yourself to understand what I'm talking about, of course, only if you're interested in this work, as to why it is that all of our actions, what we're calling action, right? Because what are we calling action? What we do, how we spend our time. And again, that's fine if you want to use the word do, but just understand that doing is involuntary. It's automatic. The body is always busy. There is a single continual stream of movement starting, in terms of our own organism. Well, sure, it starts at, fertilization. And I'm not talking about anything having to do with pro-life or pro-choice or when is the organism a person, because I'm basically saying the organism is never a person, really, if you want to go on that level. It's just physical matter, organic, but all of the movement is just automatic. from the moment that the cells are fertilized until they keep growing and developing. And that is all a single stream from in utero to now. And really, there's nothing governing that behavior except for physical laws that govern neurological processes and all of the other functioning in our body. And that doesn't mean you can't enjoy your life, because part of human functioning is thoughts and feelings, and whether or not they are coming from the same processes that, for example, a bird has, right? It's a nervous system, but I am not a person who believes or aligns with any kind of self inside of the brain that is the way it feels. But obviously we are left with our thoughts and feelings. And so I just try to align with the rawest, the most raw sense of reality, physical reality. And in that, for me, again, I discovered this before I got the background research of, that can back up what I'm saying, is that on the macro level of just looking at your body in the space, that is an observation in the same way you would observe a flower outside. It grows, it moves, it does what it does in relation to its environment. And we can only find out what our body is doing after the fact. And because of that, the answer is no, there is no choice in the matter, and there is nothing you can do in the voluntary, conscious way that it is felt. But we are all operating equally with the same tools. There is no human in the world, or now or who has ever existed, whose behavior came from anything but automatic involuntary functioning. So what we're talking about really is luck. And I wouldn't even say luck is about your circumstances, which of course, obviously, that's a stretch to say that. But luck is often about your response, your reaction to your circumstances. So where one person might have the same exact behavior as Max, but doesn't judge himself at all, then someone like Max has his behavior, which is equal to the other individual, but Max judges himself. And that is where the concept of acceptance comes. So that's where the work lies. So take everything I've said and put it into your framework of however you think of things in life. And if this appeals to you, then great. And if not, then just take a listen. Thank you, and see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Q&A series with Jill Eng, Mindful Reality. And if you are interested in coaching sessions or personalized recordings, please refer to the website at jillengmindfulreality.com. Thanks, and see you next time.